everyone. Welcome to another episode of In Conversation by Advisor Coach. Today in conversation, our guest is Mr. Abhishek Gupta, Fund Manager Equity with HSBC Mutual Fund. Welcome, Abhishek, to In Conversation by Advisor Coach today.
Thank you. Good morning to all, and looking forward to a conversation which is enriching and entangling.
Thank you very much. So, Abhishek, just to begin, could you provide our viewers, a bit about your background, about your investment management journey?
So, the journey probably started almost 2 decades back, way back in 2005. Uh, uh, I graduated after completing my postgraduate from IIM Calcutta and joined a buy side house. All through and through, I have kind of represented more being on the buy side when it comes to my investment journey. Being through firms like erstwhile Reliance Mutual Fund, the Deutsche Asset Management, Goldman Sachs Indian team, Bear Capital Partners. So it's been kind of a few organizations, but luckily being exposed to covering a lot of sectors in detail. I've spent a lot of time in with working with various fund managers to kind of again imbibe and learn from them what probably could help you to become a more I would say dispassionate but more standard and somebody who can probably look at things at a little distance rather than being too emotional about it. So yeah, a good journey, and I've been with HSBC now since February. So the journey continues.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you very much for that update on the profile. So, Abhishek, HSBC Mutual Fund is launching their NFO of HSBC India Export Opportunities Fund on the 5th of September and closing on the 19th September. So
Right.
the question is that why an export opportunities fund now? Could you let us know more in details about the strategy, about the way you'll be managing the fund, the fundamentals behind it, and will it be more sector or market cap agnostic as well?
Yeah, no, that's a very good question. And to be fair, we were all grappling at our end when we were evaluating. And this actually the idea, the germination came through when we were kind of rumbling through the transcripts and the con call, which you typically do after conclusion of a quarter, right? We saw a trend emerging where we kind of figured out that most of the export dependent industries, and there are two, three at large, they kind of started sounding a little more optimistic than what we have heard them in last 3 to 4 quarters. They talked about either concerns around inventory correction getting over, or the client spending, the discretionary part of spends getting over, more discussions at the client level. All those things kind of made us kind of take a notice that is there is something which is happening or changing at the overall global recovery factor, right? Then we went back and even looked at some of the data which is published by World Bank itself. And that also kind of alluded to the similar trend that post-COVID, things have been in a deceleration mode for a few of the larger economies. Luckily, what they even have a prognosis on, they're saying the deceleration is stopping. And maybe in next 1 or 2 years, almost all the nations which are relevant and sizable are going to go back to the growth trajectory. So that gave us a little of confidence that maybe, if not, so the gradient of recovery is still something which has to play out. But are we somewhere where the bad news is discounted now? Is that in the price? We felt that's probably what comes out to be the environment here. Last but not the least, and this is where again we are getting a lot of confidence. So if you look at in specific, even the government realizes that if our economy has to move from point A to point B,
Mhm.
and we're all working towards now that aspirational Viksit Bharat by 2047, then domestic economy and the exports are practically like twin engines of an aircraft,
That's
right?
true.
Both of them have to fire together for you to take from point A to point B. I think a lot of emphasis has been put even at the government machinery level to an extent that I think they have given now a number which is aspirational to reach a $2 trillion of export number by end of this decade itself.
Mhm.
Which again, if you kind of interpret in terms of data, is underlying assumption is that the exports are going to grow at a faster at a overall bucket level more than the economy, underlying economy. So we realize that maybe yes, the inherent impetus at the machinery and government and initiatives are in place. The world is probably just kind of on the verge of a recovery, if not exactly started. And the companies which probably will give you exposure there, again, it's kind of sounding more positive around it. So
Sure.
we encapsulated this ideology and we felt this is probably a good time. And that's where the idea germinated.
Sure, sure, sure. Could you also tell us about, the way you will be managing this fund, the strategy around it, etc. as well?
No, no, for sure. So first of all, there was also a question which you asked, is it something which is more specific, concentrated, right? When we ran as analysis and we used two thresholds here. We said any company which generates more than 20% revenues outside India as
Mm-hmm.
a cutoff, and at least 2,000 crores of market cap, because that's kind of again a minimum threshold which we would at house level for giving us liquidity opportunity. When we ran these two filters, we were ourselves surprised to see there are more than 300 companies, 310 to be precise, who
Mm-hmm.
fit the criteria, right? So obviously, just think about it. If you're talking about any specific sector or a theme, you don't start with such a wide universe to start with. So it's a pretty wide universe to start with. Then the cut which you're asking, when we looked at the sectoral representations, we were also surprised that you're talking about possibly between 14 to 16 sectors independently being represented here,
Mm-hmm.
right? We can range all the way from automobiles, chemical, pharmaceutical, technology we all know, but textiles, gems and jewelry, petchem, overall specialty chemical, incremental opportunities in building material, possibly defense export at some point of time. So there are opportunities at galore and at large. So clearly that gave us a lot of confidence that this is practically more of an umbrella rather than a specific concentrated opportunity, which gives you a play in services, merchandise exports and services each have their sub bucket which will be fairly represented here. So that gave a lot of confidence that we're probably looking at practically more like a core strategy, which can give you an opportunity to hold through it. If again the aspiration of India to reach a $2 trillion of export number has to come through, then this product should structurally be a more alpha accretive product.
Sure.
Last but not the least, we even evaluated from a cut of large, mid, and small, because again, people do have questions around that what kind of concentration you're looking at between the market caps. Again, a very interesting data came across that out of this 300 plus names which we're looking at, the representation of large cap in terms of market cap is going to be about 70% by
70%.
just the universe, right?
Okay.
I'm sorry. The mid and the small will each have about a bucket representation about 15% each. But if you look at the number of names, and that is where it gets interesting, the mid and small as a bucket would have almost 80% representation from the number of name when I look at this 300 name bucket.
Okay.
So clearly, this product is again more attuned for alpha generation by stock picking. Because the moment you go small and mid, and if you
Mm-hmm.
do the right amount of due diligence, typically you end up picking businesses which have a much longer runway to growth.
Sure.
And that clearly gives you bigger opportunity for alpha creation also.
Sure.
It's
Sure.
a very interesting product, which is all well diversified from sector, geographies, market cap, and again, it's something which is just kind of making you to evaluate a part of opportunity which was not envisioned earlier. I mean, we were also surprised when we realized it that we probably are among the very few, and maybe the first one who are actually evaluating an opportunity. So again, just I need to spend 2 minutes on this. Why HSBC India export opportunity, right? We realized that there are a lot of businesses, industries which are even the sunrise stage right now.
Mm-hmm.
These are the businesses which are going to become more prominent as the time passes by. So we wanted to capture them, as you said, capture them young, and then you enjoy the whole life cycle evolution of a business.
Sure.
So that's exactly, I think, are the again the basic premise on which the fund construction will work also.
Sure. No, certainly, because for any stable economy,
Yeah.
export is very, very important to be growing and to be stable. Absolutely. And so typically, would this scheme have about what, 55 to 65 stocks, since, it has multiple sectors and multiple market caps as well?
Yeah, so our initial thought is we'll be looking between 40 to 50.
Okay.
That's the initial number. And obviously, if there are opportunity, then just because I'm going to succeed, oversee my number by one or two name, obviously I'm not going to cut down the opportunity for a point to perform. But
Absolutely.
the ideology wise, I think 40, 50 is a good range to start with.
Sure.
Again, from an ethos perspective, at this moment, we envision this product to be run more on a multi-cap strategy. So
Multi-cap strategy.
want to keep a 50% large cap bucket, 50% mid and small bucket. Obviously, at the time of deployment, depending upon the market conditions, there could be a leeway of 10% either side.
Sure.
But in general, I think the ethos are going to be multi-cap. The number of names are going to be between 40 to 50 is what we're looking at.
Sure, sure, sure. So, Abhishek, why should investors and distributors, consider investing in this fund, HSBC India Export Opportunities, and what kind of holding time period would you suggest on this?
A great question again, and I think been again trying to give our side of perspective here, that why we believe this is a product. And as I said, right, I mean, just think about it. And these are again the numbers which are projected by government, so I can use those numbers. We are projected to have our GDP double up, nominal GDP double up in next 7 years. So
True.
that's practically about a 10%, 10 to 11% CAGR which you're looking at.
Yes.
If the aspirational number of exports have to go from $783 billion bucket today to $2 trillion, again by end of this decade, the growth of the export overall is going to be more like a 14, 15%. So the very starting point is you are looking at an opportunity, a component of the economy, which is expected to do better than the underlying economy, and then at some point of time, letting economy to realize its full potential with the benefit.
Sure.
So first is that we're clearly giving you at a very top-down view an opportunity to look at a sector which is going to grow faster. Then again, when people ask us the question that are you not taking too many, or I probably because you're doing a geography diversification, is that creating a risk? In my mind, rather, if I would have only relied on one or two geographies, right, that would have been a concentration risk. But here, it's actually a very widespread portfolio. So again, as if you remember, I said the cutoff of exports revenue is 20%. But when we ran our model, and these are more all model iterations, so the final product will get defined once the deployment happens. But again, luckily, the number which came out is on average, we were getting between at least 35% revenue export orientation to the maximum of 55%. So if I use a midpoint of that, a portfolio will again have a pretty good balance of about 60% domestic revenues and a 40-45% of export revenues. So you're getting a good balance of domestic and exports. You're again getting exposure to a bucket which is expected to grow faster. And again, a very important part. So if you look at most of the diversified strategies today, whether it's multi-cap or you look at flexi-cap, in our mind, they are at some level over-indexed to banking financial as a space because
Mm-hmm.
in very find about 30% plus exposure there, right?
True.
By the sheer construct of this portfolio, and because most of the banking and financial name don't qualify to have more than 20% export revenue, a banking exposure by default will be very less represented in this portfolio. So what we are doing is we're truly giving you a well diversified portfolio, which is not going to concentrate only on one sector as a higher proportion, good geography diversification, underlying theme which is expected to grow faster than the overall GDP.
Sure.
And I think these two, three things gives a lot of confidence that when I look at from a perspective of next 3 to 5 years, this is also horizon because again, understand one thing, global recovery, when the cycles start, it lasts typically for a longer duration. It is not a very cyclical recovery phase which you see. So it's not a start stop. Once the gradient starts picking up, it starts climbing up. So we
Mm-hmm.
believe for anyone who comes with a horizon of 3 to 5 years, because that's also the time when the government will end up realizing it's $2 trillion of aspirational number also,
Sure.
right?
Yes.
All those things getting aligned, a 3 to 5 year horizon, we are very, very confident a product like this has the pure tendency to outperform and generate alpha.
Sure. Sure. Perfect. So the favorite question, what is your thought on the market or what's your view on the market in a very near term?
Oh man, this is as impossible to answer as anyone will find it because practically, given my 2 decades of experience, I've realized it that maybe over a 18-month, 24-month, 36-month, you can still form a view because you are seeing those ideologies panning
That's
out,
right. Playing
fundamentals
out.
panning out, right? But in 3 months, a lot of variables can come into play. But in general, there is one thought which, as a house, we have been
Mhm.
propagating. We believe that intuitively perception today is that markets are becoming very expensive,
Mhm.
right? In our mind, to a great extent, there is a tacit change which is coming in the core fundamental of the economy and the underlying companies. The visibility, the longevity of growth, the visibility of opportunities, the amount of efforts being put in, they have completely brought us to a different trajectory than what we were doing earlier.
Mhm.
So you have to superimpose that understanding before you take a call on valuations. Yes, there would always be pockets of over exuberance and obviously pessimism. So as an active fund manager, our aim is always to try to minimize that. We try to find, and again as a house, we find ourselves very comfortable when we invest in mid and small cap because we still believe there are opportunities good enough and numerous enough for us to keep incrementally deploying money in mid and small. So the only message I want to say is that from a valuation perspective, don't get unduly perturbed. To be fair, in next 3 months, what will happen? I have no clue. Practically, I have no clue, and I'm not ashamed to say that. But from a next 2 years, 3 years perspective, even if the earning trajectory, what is projected to catch up, then we can very well expect that to be a rewarding journey for any investor.
Sure, 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 sure. So through this in conversation today, what message would you like to give, Abhishek, to the advisors, the mutual fund distributors, and the investors looking at this conversation about your HSBC India Export Opportunities Fund NFO particularly?
Yeah, no. So I think we have touched upon all the aspect, but if I have to encapsulate my thought,
That's right.
right?
Yeah.
So I think clearly what we looked at, we realized that perceptibly people will believe that it's the domestic part of the economy which is expected to better than the export, because again it depended a lot on various nuances of the underlying importing country. But the fact of the matter is very interesting data, right? India is the fifth largest economy in the world
Mm-hmm.
today on absolute dollar basis. India is also the fifth largest service exporter in the world.
Mm-hmm.
But India is the 17th largest merchandise exporter in the world. So clearly, I think at a countrywide level, we are under indexed to this whole opportunity of merchandise, goods, and services also doesn't mean we are stopping here. Again, a very interesting data. Although India's services exports, we are the fifth largest, but we are still among the top fastest three nations when it comes to services. So although we have been there, done that, but we're incrementally still gaining market share. So the whole idea I want to bring to the table is that given India's overall market share in the global export is just 2.3%,
Mm-hmm.
while India's share in the global GDP or the size of the economy itself is more than 4%,
That's right.
we are underrepresented here. We have a lot to do to even justify our current positioning. And with the impetus what the government brings in, luckily with our trust in our capability as active fund managers, I think this as a product has structurally a long runway from creating alpha, from giving you a true diversification, which probably would have been missing earlier, and in the same process giving you a very diversified, well-rounded solution. So I think that's my message to my investors, that evaluate it from a 3-5 year perspective, and all the building blocks are in place. We truly believe it's matter of execution. If we execute well, this theme has to kind of live up to its expectation.
Thank you very much, Abhishek. So for the viewers, this is Mr. Abhishek Gupta, fund manager, equity with HSBC Mutual Fund, talking about the fund which is being launched on 5th of September and closing on 19th September, HSBC India Export Opportunities Fund. So Abhishek, thank you very much for joining in today and giving us this detailed thought view about why an export opportunities fund in markets today, and also a short, crisp view on the markets. It was wonderful, interacting with you today. So we wish you and HSBC Mutual Fund the very best for the HSBC India Export Opportunities Fund new fund offer. Thank you very much for joining in today.
Thank you for your time, and clearly, I think it's been pretty enriching conversation. Looking forward to more like these. Thank you,
Absolutely.
everyone, and the listeners also.
Thank you very much, Abhishek.